Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. I'm hoping you guys are having a fantastic day. So today's upload is going to a video about the upcoming pattern change and what to expect across the coming days across the US. And let me tell you, there's some pretty large changes coming on. So we were stuck in a very cold pattern regime across most of the country through April and through really the first half of May. Right now it's April 12th as I'm recording this. This will be uploaded on the 13th. And it really seems like the warmer temperatures have been secluded to the west, and now possibly it will kind of get flipped around. It seems like the west will become a little bit cooler, not as cool as what the east has been, but the east will become pretty warm, pretty hot. So that is definitely good news. As I mean, here we had a killer frost just the other day, one of the most, almost a record for the city of Chicago. If it I don't know. I do know for a fact that the last time we've had a frost in Chicago in May was 2004, and downtown Chicago. I don't live in downtown, but in downtown it got down to 31, and it hasn't happened in over 16 years. So it definitely was unprecedented cold across much of April and May, and now finally looks as if there will be a warm up. So if you guys want to consider subscribing to this channel, I do all sorts of weather related stuff. Consider doing so. If not, it's perfectly fine. So let's look at the European model. This is basically a geopotential height and the mean sea level pressure. So this is basically the cooler the colors get, and you can see with this bluish color, that's below freezing and just cooler. Now the freezing line is technically this blue thing right here. This is where it starts getting light blue. Now anywhere you start seeing the oranges and yellows, that's where it gets pretty warm, and the red is just basically hot. So let's just look at what's going to happen. So this is right now what happened today. You can see that it's in a transition. We have the coldest air that has been across much of the eastern U.S. It's kind of lifting up to the north and east, and some of this warmer, milder Pacific airs lifting up to the north, along with some Gulf of Mexico air. And then you can see this continues to push through Wednesday. Now that cooler air is way pushed off to the north and east, and we see much warmer air across much of the country, across Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, into Illinois. You can see it's starting to push in with those yellow colors. Thursday, it gets just downright warm across much of the country, and it's more of a zonal flow at this point. You can see that it's the jet stream rise, something like that. We don't really have a dip or any sort of that type of pattern yet, but that will be coming. And you can see that if we push forward, Friday still zonal, but then as we push in to the next coming days, we see a ridge develop across, next week, early next week, and this could really bring some powerful heat into part of the country where they've just had frost and freezes. There could be 80s and 90s widespread across the eastern United States, but notice that the west is relatively chilly, and we have actually below average temperatures for those locations. So definitely a big pattern flip, and you can see that there's also going to be a threat for large systems. So again, it's still relatively, like chilly in atmosphere, so the systems still are kind of winter-like-ish. And you can see that this one is pretty large, and this would obviously bring in some severe weather and some flooding and some thunderstorms. Not really snow, maybe up to the mountains, that's about it. But that's another key factor that we'll be looking at some very potentially severe weather, weather. So, severe weather potential is going to be under increase. And May is the most active season, and again, we've had a very just quiet May, especially since it's been so cold. So that's why it's been quiet. And now with the warming up, a drastic warm up, we could be really looking at a whole lot more of severe weather. So let's look at the 2-meter temperature shaded off the GFS, and this also just gives us a brief rundown of what's to come. You can see that anywhere, pick your location and choose your location. Here's the dates at the top, and trying to do this so that you can maybe see it a little bit better. You can see right there, that's perfect. You can see the dates at the top, Friday, May 15th. It's looking to not too, let's go back actually. So this is Wednesday today, as I'm recording, or as I'm uploading the video. As I'm recording, it's Tuesday. We could see Wednesday a bit chilly across the Great Lakes, still below average, but it's starting to get warm across the south and west. And then it starts pushing up further and further towards the north and east. You can see Thursday's warm. Friday's another warm day, especially along the east coast. Saturday, May 16th, is just generally warm across much of the country. And then we look at Sunday, again, very warming, just getting almost hot down across the south. We can start getting the 95, 94, mid to upper 90s, the lower 90s, even some hundreds possibly across Florida. It looks as if Florida will be getting in a heat wave. Monday, you can see very warm as well. Tuesday, again, warm, right around average for the Great Lakes, but just plain, just blatantly hot across parts of the Dakotas and into Nebraska. And then as we push further and further on, it just gets more and more oppressive. You can see across these locations, we get 80s widespread. Now this is much above average. We get possibly some hundreds across the Florida Panhandle and into parts of the Louisiana, Alabama, and Georgia area. And then again, just look, the heat prevails, and we get chillier temperatures across the west, right? But I mean, the eastern United States just remains very, very nice and warm, which is what they've been longing for a long time. It's been really relatively chilly while the west has been warm. So now, if they've been wanting some cooler weather, that's what they're gonna get, I guess. It's not gonna be extremely hot for the west. It's gonna rather be moderate, maybe a bit above average for the southwest, but generally around average to below average for most locations. And you can see it just continues, and at this point it's just getting ridiculous across Florida. We're seeing widespread hundreds and upper 90s across the southeast. This is now very far out, but it's been a trending pattern, and you can see 80s, 90s widespread. And this would be this would be May 28th, so Memorial Day. I'm not sure when that falls. I think the May 25th would be Memorial Day. So you could see a very sweltering Memorial Day. And hopefully we continue to see this pattern because many people are just sick and tired. We've had a really crummy winter. It was warm, right? But that doesn't mean that the temperatures were warm by themselves. Many people think that, warm winter in Indiana or Ohio means 60s and 70s. No, it means 30s and 40s versus 20s and single digits, or teens. So it's been a long kind of winter. It's been long in a sense that it's been just dreary. And spring, while it was supposed to warm up, it was just even more brutally cold. It just got cold. So we've had basically from a November through a May, we've had basically like the same temperatures. Obviously a little bit warmed up towards the end, May, April, but not much. It's not as much as it should have been on average. And they're predicting an above average spring, which at this point it only looks as if May will be above average, the second half of May, not even the first half. And then March was also above average. Yes, that was the thing. But again, March averages aren't that high. So even if it's above average, you may get a few 50s up towards the northern U.S., the central U.S., and then towards the south, it probably was pretty warm. But and it was pretty warm. So if we were to look now at some of the precipitation amounts, I kind of want to just quickly demonstrate that the rainfall amounts will be pretty significant. Now, they're not record-breaking. You can see there's no yellows or dark purples, or not dark purples, dark reds, but there are a few areas with purple, which getting into that red amount, which is 6 inches plus, and you were here in Texas, but a good amount of areas above 2 inches, which is pretty large. It's nothing unheard of, but it's definitely something that could be definitely monitored, as the soil levels are pretty high with water, not unbearably high. We've had depends where you live exactly, but it's been wet across the south and into Kentucky, Tennessee, Missouri, Arkansas. But hasn't been terribly too wet. It's not ridiculous. I mean, depends. It could, vary over a county. Depends on where a severe thunderstorm is set up or not. But we're going to be definitely looking at more wet and rainy weather. But it's also going to be warm. Area of concern that concerns me is not really how much rain, but how little rain across these locations. There's going to be not much rain according to the GFS here, this model run, and if that were to pan out with the heat that's expected, that would not be good. That would mean probably some drought areas or abnormally dry areas would be prevailing across the locations. So that's definitely not good news. But again, this could still change, but it's an early outlook, so definitely has to be monitored. Let's look at the Canadian model. This one only goes out to 240 hours, but notice that it shows a classic spring pattern where we see this flow from the Gulf of Mexico along kind of like this highway, and you can see just very heavy precipitation among these areas, and anywhere on the outside isn't that heavy. And again, you can see a lack of precipitation across these areas, and it's going to be very hot there, so it looks as if that could be a cause for concern. If you were to look at, say, the European model, it shows much of the same pattern if you were to look at it. So I'll show you the European model right now. And again, this one frankly not showing anything at all across the southeast, and the temperatures will be warm, so that's definitely not good news. But showing a lot of precip across the Dallas, Texas area. You could see just eastern Texas looking very soggy, and it moves up kind of with this highway-like pattern into the parts of Illinois, Missouri, Iowa. You could see well over an inch, 2 inches, which isn't ridiculous, but it's definitely wet. It's definitely not, awfully dry. So it's more towards awfully wet than awfully dry. But if you were to look at the Southwest, not much either. It's more across the central part of the country and possibly the northern U.S., the upper Midwest, but not really so much the Southeast or the Southwest, which the Southeast, again, is a cause for concern as it will be very, very dry there. Very hot and dry, so that could lead to some drought conditions. If we were to look at the 8 to 14 day outlook, this one shows very, very above average precipitation, or very above average temperatures across the eastern U.S., cooler across the western, which was what I was talking about. And you can see that it's kind of flipped around. And then again, below average precip for the East Coast, just above across the kind of like the central part of the country. This one's a little bit shifted to the west than what the models are showing. And then if you were to look at the 6 to 10 day outlook, much of the same pattern in terms of temperatures, and a little bit different for above for precip. You can see it's just more below across the center part of the country, and more above across the northwest. But again, the area of concern is the south, where it will be hot and dry. So thank you guys so much for watching. Consider liking the video, consider subscribing to this channel. I'll catch you all guys in the next episode. See y'all. Bye.